the Chief Technology Officer for the Canada Border Services Agency, Mindone, destroyed 1,700 emails related to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's $60 million Arrive scam.
I've heard the news in the media, yes.
And you've said before that that the investigations that you're undertaking are not something that you list on your website, correct?
No.
How many active investigations did you say that you have?
Total?
Yes, ma'am.
We have presently 2,900.
2,900.
Yeah.
Okay.
Approximately. Yeah.
What would it take for a committee, what would it take for a committee in the form of instruction to you to be able to have for us to be able to be assured that an investigation were taking place?
I would need a complaint.
You would need a complaint.
Yes.
So a request to conduct an investigation isn't sufficient. A complaint to you is required.
Usually, as the investigation has to be linked to an access request that was made, and if the person is unsatisfied with the response or the timelines, they can complain to my office.
And you have received complaints related to the ArriveCAN application?
I cannot say which one and how and what, but yes, generally we have complaints with respect to CBSA.
You have complaints related to CBSA. Is there obviously not with the 2,900 ongoing investigations that you have, is there any standard amount of time for your the conclusion of your investigations that a service standard that you have in your office?
We try to do, depending if it's a timeline issue, delay complaints, it's within 90 days. If it's a refusal, exemptions, or missing records, that could go up to 6 to 9 months.
So up to 9 months for missing records. If, for example,
that's the standard, depending on how.
That's the standard. That's it. And then if you saw fit, then you could table with Parliament your findings if you deemed that it was what was the standard in the public interest, or
if it's a matter that I believe the Parliament should be aware of, I have the authority to table special reports. So if it's something that I believe that not just the institution or the complainant should be aware of, I can use a special report to provide that information to Parliament.
Well, I very much appreciate your responses and trust that you having been here today indicates Parliament's keen interest in your work with relation to CBSA and missing documents. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Kuzmierczak, and then we'll finish up with Mrs. Vignola and then Mr. Julian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for being here with us this afternoon, and thank you so much for your excellent answers and shedding some important light. You I guess a few months ago, you met with frequent users of the ATIP process, or frequent users of your office, for a feedback session, and I just wanted to ask, what are some of the comments that you heard from the folks that utilize the ATIP process and utilize the help of your office? What did you hear from them in terms of how we can improve things moving forward?
The consultation you're referring to is a consultation we did with respect to our own process and make sure that we are responding to, that we understand the client's the complainant's view on how we can make it easier for them. So definitely there's going to be, some of the comments was they want our investigation to go faster, they want more information on our website, they want to understand the process better. Having more conversation with our investigators frequently. This is something we just received the feedback from the company that did the consultations, and we're going to be making the report public and the response of our office public as well.
Out of those suggestions, is there one that you feel ought to be prioritized, or that you've discussed with your team that ought to be prioritized in the near future?
Yeah, we haven't had the chance to even have a discussion yet, but we also have to be aware of the resources issue. So I want to do my investigation faster, so we have to find ways to be more efficient with the resources that we have.
Wonderful. And I'm actually really pleased to hear that you organize that type of platform and gather that type of feedback from the folks that utilize your services. So kudos to you for doing that. I just wanted to ask you, how independent is your office, is the Office of the Information Commissioner? How independent are you from government, from politics?
I'm fully independent. I can tell you that, except for funding.
How appropriate is it for a member of parliament, as we just seen a few minutes ago, directing you to conduct investigations on an issue?
Well, this is a reason why I cannot accept a request for an investigation. But if a complaint comes to me from anybody, including members of parliaments, this is something that we definitely can investigate.
Excellent. I wanted to ask you, what percentage of all requests made, ATIP requests made, end up becoming complaints that are sent to your office?
About 5%.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
5% of all requests.
About 5%, yes. Can you give us a sense relative to some of our peer countries? Is that good? Is that bad? Can you give us a sense of what 5% means? So out of all the ATIP requests that are submitted, 5% end up as complaints in your office. Can you give us a sense? Is that high? Is that low? Is that average in terms of peer jurisdictions?
I have no idea with respect to other countries. I can tell you I'm the most busy access to information commissioner in Canada.
Certainly. Okay, it would be really helpful if at some point you might be able to find that information out in terms of how do we compare with other jurisdictions and other countries as well too. That would be quite helpful if you're able to send that. I wanted to ask you how you handle high volume requesters. We know that there are situations, for example, where an individual may request dozens, if not hundreds of requests. Is there a special approach that you take to high volume requesters?
We try to talk to them and decide with them which one to prioritize. So we have a very open conversation with these requesters so that they know that we can't all investigate 19, let's say, or 50, or sometimes 100 cases for one requester or one complainant. So we try to work with the person and prioritize those complaints.
Commissioner, I really do appreciate how you go back and forth with the folks that utilize the ATIP and information systems. That's really encouraging to hear. I did have one final question. Mr. Chair, do I have any time left?
10 seconds.
10 seconds. Commissioner, really quickly, this committee has asked for hundreds of thousands of documents to be produced. Can you provide any advice to a body like the committee that often asks agencies to produce hundreds of thousands of documents over the course of mere months on a specific issue? Do you have any advice how we might be able to help out the folks that are producing those documents in terms of how we craft the requests?
Real quick answer.
I think you just need to make sure you ask for the proper information, like in scope, the subject you want to have the information for.
Thanks very much. Mrs. Vignola, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My question is the one that I wanted to ask from the outset. I really want to know this. In the case of ArriveCAN and in the contracting out by GC Strategies to other firms, if it was, no, that's not a good question. Let me say, I'll put it in another way. When you look at what happened with ArriveCAN, GC Strategies contracted out to KPMG, two guys in their basement. When you have contractors who let subcontracts, and it just goes on and on, how can you analyze transparency in this? Really, because it seems to me it's difficult to ascertain. It really depends on the contract. There are contracts that I can't speak to, but there are contracts where we have seen clauses where it specifies that the contractor will let subcontracts, and in other contracts and other agreements, it's the inverse. Well, how can it be that some will say, everything you're going to give me will be accessible, and in others contracts that certain information will be hidden? It is the contractor himself, the contracting entity, that would decide. I can't speak to that. Are there members? Well, I've made a submission to extend the number of agents possible. I want to know how many contractors, subcontractors are using public funds, and say, for example, in PCO, in the PMO, in the whole country. I want to establish an extent to which this is happening. Have you had an answer? Well, open contracting, not before 2025.
Mr. Julian, to finish things up, please.
Thank you very much, Madame Minat, for your service on behalf of Canadians. I want to come back to an earlier question. You said, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, 536 existing files on CBSA, 654 complaints that you would be examining. That leads us to a total of 1,190 complaints of CBSA, both presently and ongoing. Are those figures correct? And if so, they're astounding. And does CBSA seem to engender more complaints than any other part of government? Is this looking at your overall number of complaints, seems to be beating other departments? Is that true?
So currently, we have received 654. We have 536 active cases remaining in our inventory against CBSA, and it is the number one institutions on top of the most complaints received this year. And I have to say, this is why I started a systemic investigation with respect to CBSA to find out the root cause. And this is a special report that we're going to be tabling in May with respect to that investigation.
And thank you for your work on this. This is something that obviously requires transparency. And it is astounding to me that CBSA has been so negligent in responding to the requirement for information. For CBSA and for other government departments, for something like a sole source contract, like the one we have with ArriveCan, what information should they be keeping to ensure that we know what Canadians have spent on those contracts, who did the work, and why those contracting decisions were made?
Like any government institution that is doing contracting, including my office, there are rules with respect to contracting. There's controls in place. I believe that any decisions like this should be well documented. This discussion with respect to amendments of the contract should be as well recorded. These records are, like I said earlier, the documents are being asked, and we should be able to provide Canadians with as much information as how much the public funds are being spent and how.
Thank you, Mr. Julian. Ms. Maynard, thank you again for joining us. I appreciate your time. I look forward to hearing or receiving your list of perhaps legislative changes we can put through to empower your department. I just have one question, if colleagues will allow me, before you go. And you may have answered it, but it wasn't clear. If you're